welcome to Paranormal History. My name is Tommy. I am the T in the Paranormal Minds of JST. And in this series, we look at some of history's more paranormal sort of moments. So if you're into that type of content, like, share, subscribe. It helps out the YouTube channel, which is also connected to our podcast, the Paranormal Minds of JST, which you can find on all platforms where podcasts thrive. Enough with the sales pitch, because today's journey we're going to go a little bit further into the past and into more recent history, because we have a bit of an immortal Forrest Gump on our hands, folks, so let's take a look. Our immortal Forrest Gump's name was, or is, or was at the time that our story begins, the Count de Saint-Germain, or the Count of Saint-Germain in English, which I'll be using going forward. He was allegedly born in or around 1690, and why I say allegedly will be more apparent as our story unfolds. According to a genealogy for this gentleman, which was put together by Annie Besant for her book, The Count de Saint-Germain, The Secret of Kings, he was the son of one Prince Rákóczi II of Transylvania. While there doesn't seem to be too much of a paper trail for what he was doing for the first 50 or so years of his life, he apparently had just spent some time in Persia, where he learned to craft jewels before his big splash in European high society was made in 1742. I will concede that he was, in fact, if he was, in fact, the son of a prince, he very well may have received the best education growing up that he possibly could. He was also obviously well-traveled before arriving on the social scene in 1742. However, he seems to have known, in my opinion, more than most people would know for just 52 years' experience on their hands. He knew all about art, music, philosophy, the latest science and alchemy, and knew basically every major European language, as well as Chinese, Arabic, ancient Greece, and Sanskrit. He also showed up much wealthier than most of the people in European high society. He became involved with, and a whole lot of them were actually monarchs. His charm and wit were reportedly second to none. The Count de Saint-Germain essentially showed up as a de facto richest, smartest, most charming guy around out of absolutely nowhere, looking no more than about 45 years old. Now, at this point, I want to reiterate, he was already supposed to be 52 years old if he was born in 1690. That's important to understand, because for the rest of what we're about to cover, he didn't age. By all accounts, every single one of them, he never looked any older than about 45 years old. This was first really mentioned because of an encounter Countess von Gregory had at a party thrown by King Louis XV's mistress, Madame de Pompadour, in 1760. The Countess, an old woman at this point, heard mention there was a Count of Saint-Germain present, and she remembered such a man by a title being in Venice when she was a girl. She sought him out, thinking she perhaps met his father or grandfather back then. Upon meeting him, he shockingly looked identical to the man she'd known. When she asked him if she'd known his father in Venice around 1710, he nonchalantly informed her that no, he himself had been in Venice around that time. When she retorted, he must have been over 100 years old. If that were true, he simply told her, well, it's not impossible. The rest of their conversation convinced her that he was actually the same man, as he was able to tell her all about meeting her then and various other things going on at the time only people present would have been able to know, such as their own various encounters when she was young. Pretty hard to believe that he'd been a 20-year-old man confused for 45. Over the next 40 years, the Count de Saint Germain showed up in fabulous cities and famous courts. He made no secrets that he was an alchemist, reportedly setting up an extensive personal laboratory in every place he stayed for a while. Whispers were about that he had found out how to turn any regular metal into gold and create and manipulate the size and color of expensive gems with his skills, often adorning his clothes with the gold and gems. Germain would freely give out recipes for wrinkle creams and hair dyes to his friends. Of course, it was also speculated he had figured out how to become immortal through alchemy as well. He was supposedly one of the best violinists around and a master painter to boot. Needless to say, he made a lot of friends. Among those friends were King Louis XV, Voltaire, Casanova, Catherine the Great, and Prince Charles of Hessen-Kassel. He was apparently employed to spy in England for Louis XV, and it is said that he even played a part in the plot to officially put Catherine on the Russian throne. Voltaire once proclaimed Saint Germain as a man who never dies and who knows everything. Which is pretty obvious since he never aged and seemed to have known, well, everything. Casanova's account of him was that he would say in an easy, assured manner that he was 300 years old, that he knew the secrets of the universal medicine, and that he possessed a mastery over nature, that he could melt diamonds. All this, he said, was mere trifle to him. It was after helping Catherine the Great secure her throne that he allegedly went back to France in 1774 and attempted to warn his friend Louis XV and his wife, Marie Antoinette, about the revolution he feared would come. Unfortunately, they did not listen. Germain then left for Germany in 1779, where he befriended Prince Charles of Hessen-Kassel. After hanging out with his friend Charlie, whatever you want to call him, for 5 years at his court, he finally met his death in 1784. Except, maybe not. In 1785, only a year after his supposed death, he was hanging out with the forefather of hypnotism, Franz Anton Mesmer. You know, the guy whose name we get the word mesmerize from. Interesting that these two were pals, because some say he actually got the groundwork for his theories from, you guessed it, the Count of Saint Germain. He's also in the records as a representative for a Freemason convention the same year. At this point, we can officially say, Vive le Count, as he reappeared in France during and after the revolution there. He visited with gal pal, Countess Dadamar, on multiple occasions between 1789 and 1820. It seems to have been the end of a very long era for the Count. He'd led a fun life as the son of a Transylvania prince and befriended royalty. He spied for monarchs and seen the fall of great European houses. His friends from such an age were all dead. Albert Dresden Vandam wrote in his memoirs, An Englishman in Paris, Notes and Recollections, published in 1892, about a man who had more than a passing resemblance to Saint Germain. Chilling in France, this man had appeared just as Saint Germain had previously, out of nowhere, going by the monarch of Major Frazier. He was somewhat a pillar of the community, a town favorite, if you will. But no one really knew anything about him. He just showed up at the same cafe every day and read the paper. He always had money, but no one knew where he acquired it. He knew all about the countries of Europe from all different times. And the most he would say about that is, frankly, that he didn't learn what he knew from books. When Vandam, a journalist by trade, decided to talk to this Major Frazier, the man told him, with a strange smile, that he was certain he had known Nero and spoke with Dante and so on. It was after meeting Mr. Vandam that Major Frazier disappeared just as suddenly as he shown up. The Count of Saint Germain again resurfaced in 1897 when a French singer named Emma Calve, who some sources claim may or may not have had an affair with the notorious Count, autographed a portrait of herself for him, which is, and I use this word heavily here, allegedly still in existence. I could not find a picture of said autograph portrait online. The last entry of a sighting of the Count was in the 1970s. A man by the name of Richard Chanfrey announced he was the Count in 1972. He then went on television claiming he could turn lead into gold to prove his identity, which he proceeded to apparently do. He replicated this for a Spanish station a couple of years later, this time with some scientists in attendance while he did so. He was dating the French singer Dalida by then. They broke up in 1981, and he took his life in 1983 by asphyxiation via car exhaust. With all that being said, Richard Chanfrey, while he absolutely fancied and believed himself to be the Count of Saint Germain, was rather easily proved to be just Richard Chanfrey, born in Lyon, France in 1940. Aside from all the more verifiable accounts of his existence, the concrete paper trail sort of stuff, the Count of Saint Germain has appeared many times in popular culture as fictional characters, such as in the Marvel Universe on Earth 616, in Chelsea Quinn's Yarborough's romance novel as a protagonist, and played by James Marsters on Warehouse 13. He's also reportedly shown up as a figure linked to secret societies and occultic magic, such as Rosicrucianism. But who was he really? What do you think? Again, if you enjoy paranormal history with me, please give us a like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to check out our podcast, The Paranormal Minds of JST, and become a Patreon for us over on Patreon. This has been another episode of Paranormal History. Tell us what you think.